Welcome to Caresmartz 360 on Air, a home care podcast. I am Ruby Mehta, VP of Sales at Caresmartz. Home care CEOs are the architects of successful agencies. They set the vision, steer strategy, and ensure the resources are in place to deliver exceptional care. Effective CEOs attract and retain top talent by fostering a positive work environment, competitive compensation. They navigate complex regulations, securing funding and partnership to expand services. Their leadership ensures that the agency is financially sound and adapts to industry changes. Ultimately, strong home care CEOs create a foundation for high quality, accessible care, raising the bar for the entire industry. More than anything, they champion advocacy efforts, influencing policy changes that benefit both the elderly and caregivers, further solidifying the home care industry's role in offering adequate support to seniors. Today, we have Stephen Tweed, the founder of Home Care CEO Forum and the author himself, on the panel. The forum offers a platform for CEOs in the top tier of home care to connect, share ideas, solve problems, and support one another. Welcome to the podcast, Stephen. How are you?
Well, thank you, Ruby. It's delightful to be with you today.
Thank you. So this is a podcast series we have been doing, Stephen, and I am honored that you accepted the invitation today.
Well, I know you have a big following out there, and we're always delighted to reach out to those that are actively engaged in the home care industry to share the facts, the data, the information, the experience that we've collected over the years. So it's great to be with you and to be with your audience.
Thank you, Stephen. So tell us, Stephen, how did the Home Care CEO Forum started, and how do you see it's impacting the industry's success?
Well, it's been a wonderful journey. I've been speaking and writing and consulting in the home care industry now for over 3 decades. And so I speak often at association conferences and corporate meetings. And a number of years ago, I was speaking at a conference in Missouri, and I met a young man who was the chief operating officer of a home care company. And sometime later, he called me in my office and said he was coming through Louisville. Could he stop and visit? I said, absolutely, sure. And we had a wonderful visit. And as part of that conversation, he said, one of the things that I would love to have is a group of home care companies that are similar in size to our company, but that are in different markets so that we don't compete with one another, where we could share ideas and solve problems and support one another. And I thought that was a great idea. And the idea coincided with our experience. My wife, Elizabeth Jeffries, is my business partner, and we have one company, but 2 different practices. And Elizabeth and I met through professional speaking at our national association, the National Speakers Association. And we had been involved and engaged in a number of mastermind groups with other professional speakers. And the combination of being active in our association and being in mastermind groups really were keys to us growing in our business and our career as professional speakers and authors and subject matter experts. And so I said to this young man, his name is Andrew Huber, and he's now the owner of his family's company, Martha's Hands in St. Louis, Missouri. And so we talked about it more, and we put together the first group. And at that time, this was in February of 2013, we organized what was then called the $5 million mastermind group. And at that time, $5 million was a big home care company. Today, that's sort of just above the median. It would be in what we call our top 10% group. But we organized that group. We met in Orlando, Florida in February of 2013. We had 5 companies and 8 people. And we met for a day and a half and then said, if this was valuable and you would like to keep going, let us know. Everybody said yes. And that was the creation of what is today our top 5% mastermind group. And these are companies that are at or above the 95th percentile in the industry based on annual revenue. And if you look at the Home Care Pulse benchmarking study, the 95th percentile is just over $10 million. Our members average about $12.5 million in annual revenue, and this group ranges from 10 million to 30 million. And so these are clearly the top tier companies in the industry. And that group has continued to meet, and Andrew and his family and and Martha's Hands are still active in the group after 11 years. And so that's a real lasting legacy that he has created. The Home Care CEO Forum now has 5 different mastermind groups, different size companies. Nobody competes with anybody else in the same group. We have, I think, 55 companies now that are part of the mastermind series, and each group meets twice a year face-to-face for a day and a half, and once a month by Zoom. And then we offer a monthly event called the Mastermind Town Hall, where we have an outside speaker, and all of the members of all of the groups are invited to participate. So the organization has really come together. It has really gelled, and continues to grow in terms of numbers of members. And we're about to split one of our groups into 2, a group we call the top 10% group. And these are companies between $3 and $6 million in annual revenue. So the second part of your question is, how do we see this impacting the industry's success? And I think there's a couple of ways. First of all, our members are all actively involved in supporting the Home Care Association of America. And that's the large national association representing non-medical home care. And early on in the organization of the Home Care CEO Forum, we actually had 6 of our members or former members who were on the board of the Home Care Association of America. There are 12 members on the board. 6 of them are from franchise organizations. 6 of them are independents. And at one time, all of the independents were either current or former members of our group. So we're active supporters of the National Association and the advocacy that they do for home care. And our members are also leaders in their states, in their state associations, in their state chapters of HCAOA. And they're also frequent guests on podcasts and webinars and other educational events, speaking at association conferences. So these are folks who are really leaders in the industry. They're thought leaders, but they're also leaders of the top tier companies in the industry. And obviously, they're having a huge impact on helping other home care companies grow and serve more clients.
Yeah, thank you. And how do you, Stephen, if someone wants to join the mastermind groups, what's the best way? Who do they reach out and how do they join?
Well, our website is homecareceo.com, and there's a section there on mastermind groups. And if someone is interested in exploring it, there's a web form on the page they can fill out, and one of our leaders will reach out and set up a conversation either by phone or by Zoom and explain the nature of the mastermind groups and the criteria for membership, and if they are a good fit, and if the group where they fit has an opening, because some of the groups are full. And as I mentioned, no one in the group can compete with anyone else in the group. So if their market area is taken up by another member of that group, then they either have to go to a different group or they have to go on a waiting list.
Yeah.
So once we have that conversation and it looks like it's a good fit and there's space available, then the next step is we invite them to visit one of our monthly Zoom meetings, meet the members, share a little bit about their company. And if it feels like a good fit, then they're invited to become a member of the group, and members pay an annual dues. And that covers the 2 in-person meetings, the 10 online Zoom meetings, the mastermind town halls, and then unlimited access to their mastermind group facilitator. And each group has an experienced facilitator who has formerly run a home care company. And so they bring expertise, but the real role is to facilitate, not to teach. So they're leading and guiding discussions, and the members learn from each other. And that's proven to be the real value of these groups. And many of our members have been here for 8 or 9 or 7 years. And then we have new members joining each year as the groups expand and we add more groups.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I just want to make sure that the audience listening to this podcast should know how to join.
Sure.
There are openings.
And we have groups ranging from our what we call our strategic growth group, which is from 1.5 to 3 million, up to the top 5% group, which is 10 to 30 million. So any independent home care company between 1.5 million and 30 million is invited to come and take a look and see if it might be a good fit. At this point in time, we do not have any groups for franchise home care companies, but we are exploring that, and we have a waiting list of franchise companies that would like to be part of a mastermind group. And so that's in the works as soon as we get a critical mass of large franchisees who would like to be part of a group.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. All right. Coming back to our podcast topic here. What are some of the key leadership qualities or strategies that you have observed, because you have met with so many CEOs and so many CEOs are part of your mastermind groups? What are some of those leadership qualities or strategies that you have observed amongst them?
Well, actually, over the years, I have developed what I call the 7 lessons from the mega companies. And these are 7 specific lessons that I've crafted from 10 years of interaction with these large home care companies. And so the first one is that the leaders of these top tier companies have a huge vision. They see themselves running a big company. They see that company. We have a process we call our executive strategy retreat. And one of the tools in there is our vision planning worksheet. And this is where we get participants to look 5 years out and say, what do you see your company looking like 5 years from now? So the leaders of these top tier companies by nature have a huge vision for what they see their company look like. And they're always fine tuning and that vision and pushing it out further into the future. The second characteristic of these strong leaders is that they create a strong culture. Mm-hmm. And we define culture as the way we do things around here. And the culture of a home care company is influenced by 4 factors. One is the leadership style of the CEO. And so this fits with the question that we're talking about, is that their leadership style helps to shape the culture of the company. Second, it's influenced by the core values that guide decisions and action. And in our process, we do a lot of work in helping companies define their core values. And then the third element is the behavior that you expect. And so for each of the core values, we get them to define what are the behaviors that go with those core values. And then the fourth element is the behavior you permit. And that is, what are the consequences when people inside the company demonstrate behavior that's not consistent with the core value? And so do we have a process, and are leaders willing to carefront individuals who are not demonstrating behaviors that are consistent with the value? And my wife, Elizabeth, who coaches physician leaders in academic medicine, I mentioned we have 1 company, but 2 practices. And so I'm working on the home care side. She works in academic medicine. And one of her messages to these physician leaders is the behavior you permit, you promote. And so that's why when we're talking about company culture, we go back to what are the behaviors that we expect and what are the behaviors that we permit. The third element is really creating distinction. It's leaders that are able to see how their company is different from their competitors in the local marketplace, and to be able to communicate that message in such a way that referral partners and individual consumers are able to make a choice that this is the company we want to work with because they're different than everybody else. And as you know, Ruby, our research suggests there are about 26,000 companies providing in-home personal care just in the United States, and there's a large number in Canada as well. The median size company last year, according to the Homecare Pulse benchmarking study, was $1.7 million in annual revenue. So that's the middle. So there's 13,000 companies smaller than $1.7 million, 13,000 companies bigger than $1.7 million. And so most communities in America, most marketplaces are pretty much saturated with home care companies. So how do you differentiate yourself? How do you create distinction? And that leads to the fourth leadership quality or competency is being on purpose and having a clear sense of purpose that's articulated through stories. Leaders are storytellers, and the story comes back to some basics. Why did we start our company? Why do we exist today? Why should consumers do business with us? Why should referral partners refer to us? Why should caregivers work with us? And I can give you a list of bullet points to answer all those questions, but nobody remembers bullet points. What people remember is story, and stories create emotional connection. And so these leaders each have their own story about how they got into home care and why they stay in home care and why people should work for them. And all of that is woven into this concept of being on purpose. The fifth competency is building an amazing team. And again, these top tier leaders have amazing teams around them, starting with their leadership team and their management team and their frontline office team, and then their caregivers. And so the competency of recruiting and selecting high performance individuals, whether it's a vice president of sales or whether it's a frontline caregiver, are part of the characteristics of these leaders. And then the sixth element is being a systems thinker. And being in home care technology, you know about systems. And as a matter of fact, we encourage our members to think about how they use technology to automate their systems. But in our research, we have identified 12 specific systems that exist within a home care company. And so then how do we refine those systems? And we think about a system as process plus people. So it's a step-by-step process. Here's how we go step-by-step to achieve this result. And here's what people need to be able to do. So we hire people who have the skills and the discipline to implement those steps in the system. And then the last competency, the seventh, is measuring performance and communicating expectations. The leaders of the companies in the top tier of home care are very much in tune with the data and the information about their company. They make decisions based on data and not based on opinion. My favorite quote comes from W. Edwards Deming, who is the quality guru after World War II, who said, "Without the data, you're just another person with an opinion." And so these leaders at the top tier have scorecards, they have metrics, they review those metrics regularly. Those metrics become the basis for communication, for team meetings, for executive meetings, for sales meetings, for recruiting meetings, and they use those data to fine-tune their decision-making. And so we look at those 7 things, and these are the lessons that we've learned and that we share frequently with audiences. If I'm speaking at the Home Care Association of America, or I'm speaking at a state conference, or I'm speaking at a franchise organization meeting, we're often sharing those lessons and going into detail, but what that really means and what it looks like.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I mean, you explained it so well, so well. You already covered my next question. I was about to ask the most effective strategies CEOs can use to streamline their operations and ensure that the caregivers are satisfied. But how beautifully you've explained those seven strategies already. Is there something else that coming to your mind on most effective strategies CEOs can use?
Well, I think there's two of those seven that we could dig more deeply into. The first
Yeah.
one, as it relates to your company and home care technology, is refining systems and using technology to automate those systems. And we spend a lot of time with our members talking about the software that they use and how they use the capacity of that software to create workflows and create step-by-step system. And there's a lot of different software serving home care companies. They're all a little bit different. There's none that's absolutely perfect. And so people make a choice. And then once they make the choice, it's how do we take that platform and how do we use the workflow that exists in that platform, and how do we use our ability to tailor the fields and the reporting and the results of that platform to be able to put in place our own systems? And then how do we get the people to follow the workflows and follow the systems? And I'm sure you know, the biggest challenge for software is getting the people to actually follow the workflow and use the capacity. I don't know about your users, but I'm on my computer all day, every day, and I use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, and I use Zoom, and I'm generous if I say I probably use 10% of the capacity of those various platforms. And I'm not a techie guy, but assuming a home care company is using, I don't know, 30 or 40% of the capacity of their operating system, what if they used 80 or 90% of the capacity? And so that comes down to then having your system laid out, knowing what the platform is capable of doing, knowing what it's designed to do. There's always several different ways to get an outcome, but then having the people who are in the day-to-day operations understanding how the platform works and understanding how to leverage. And obviously scheduling is a big part of home care, and that's one of the core functions of home care operating systems. And so are those people doing scheduling really maximizing the system? Are they refining the system? Are they using it effectively and efficiently? And then that filters out to the recruiting people and the caregivers. It filters out to the salespeople and the referral partners. It filters out to clients and client contact care managers and so on. And so I think really working on those systems becomes an important part of the role of leaders in the organization. The other one is the culture. And our members at the top tier of the industry are spending a lot of time working on the culture, clarifying their core values, clarifying the behaviors, communicating that, reinforcing that, offering recognition and reward to employees, coaching employees, whether it's senior leaders coaching middle managers coaching frontline office team members, caregiver contact people, whether it's a scheduling coordinator or a care coordinator, coaching their caregivers on what's appropriate, the appropriate behavior. All of those are pieces that go to craft the culture of the company. And the leading companies in our industry all have a really strong culture, and the CEOs and the C-suite team members are constantly working on crafting that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that one, technology and making sure that you learn from your data. At
Right.
least Caresmartz did something. I know we created some AI dashboards or machine learning dashboards, because the administration, the CEOs, they are often very busy doing a lot of stuff, especially with that growing agency setup. They do
Right.
a lot of stuff. They have a lot of data, but sometimes it's not readable. Sometimes they have to spend a lot of time really get that meaningful analysis of that data. So having those real good dashboards and learning from your own data and trends really helps. That's what I have seen working really good for CEOs who are keen to learn from their data, but they don't have time to really put things in Excel, or maybe people don't even know how to use Excel to that extent, so they can create pivot charts and stuff.
Well, that's a great point, Ruby. And years ago, I learned from a friend and colleague who is probably the world's leading technology forecaster. His name is Daniel Burris. And Daniel talks about information and data. And he taught us about what I call the 4 levels of your data stream. And the first level is raw data. That's bits and bytes of information, and that's what you store inside your software. And raw data by itself is totally useless. It's only when you take that raw data and tabulate it and organize it. So you mentioned Excel spreadsheets. So you take all the data in the software and you print a report, and now you have information. But we're overloaded with information. What we really need to do is take all of that information and analyze it and synthesize it to get knowledge. And then we mix knowledge with gray hair and we get wisdom. Knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And that's what we see at the top tiers of home care, is leaders who have been in this business a long time, many of whom come to home care from other types of experience, other business experience, other healthcare experience. And so they put their personal experience together with the information and knowledge of their own company and of the industry. And they're then able to put that together and make wise decisions. As you said, there's way too much information. And one of the big complaints I hear about home care software is the whole report writing capability. The data's in there. How do I get it out in a way that's meaningful? And then how do I put it in a format like an Excel spreadsheet where I can analyze it and synthesize it and draw that out? So, for example, one of the things that we often talk with our members about is, who's your ideal client? That is, what's the type of client that brings you the highest hours per week of care and the longest length of stay? And so what's their clinical condition, their diagnosis, their disease state? How do they come to you? Who's the referral partner that sent them? Where did they find out about you? From what advertising, marketing, social media? How did they find you? So when you put all of those pieces together, then you can say, okay, here's our ideal client, and it sort of like ripples in the pond out from there. So you have a bullseye and then ripples coming out. And so we want to focus our energy and activity on finding more of those best fit clients. The same thing is true of caregivers. And what we have learned is that if we have a group of best fit caregivers and we match them up with a group of best fit clients, they both stay with us longer, and we have a stable, steady schedule where we have a client that's getting 40 hours of care a week and they stay with us for 5 years, and we have a caregiver who wants to work 40 hours a week with that client and they stay for 5 years, and we have this stable, steady kind of care. But we can only focus on our best fit client if we have the data and then the information and then the knowledge, and we take time to work with that and sit down with our salespeople and help them focus on, how do we reach the referral partners who bring us the clients who are in that best fit category. And we've done a lot of research with some of our members looking at calculating the dollar value of a client. We look at the length of stay and the revenue, let's say on a monthly basis, and we're able to calculate the total dollar value of a client over the life of the client. The Home Care Pulse benchmarking study reports every year on the average length of stay, and it was 11, 12 months, and last year it dropped down to 9 months. And so we look at our members, and we have members in our top 5% group who have average length of stay of 24 months and average hours per client per week in the 30s and 40s, when the average hours per client per week across the industry is in the low to mid 20s. And so this is how we use data, but analyze it and synthesize the information to figure out what we need to know to focus our sales effort and focus our recruiting efforts to get those ideal fit clients and those ideal fit caregivers. And it's only when you have the raw data. And I know that you folks in your business strive to get your users to put the data in.
Yeah.
And, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the data, you don't have the information. And so our message is to our members, every time there's a touch point, a contact between anyone outside the home care company and the company, that needs to get documented in your operating system. And so if we recruit a caregiver and we get an applicant, that goes in the system. If they get hired, that goes in the system. When they visit a client, that goes in the system. When they call off sick, that goes in the system. On the client side, every telephone call gets documented. Every conversation with the client, every email, every text, every touch point with the client, every visit notes, plan of care, check off the activities. And then we look at our referral partners and every touch with a referral partner, every referral they make, all that gets documented. And so we have, 3 modules in our operating system. We have a client module, we have a caregiver module, we have a referral module, and every time there's a touch, that gets documented. Now we've got a computer full of raw data.
Yeah.
But that's only useful if we can get it out in a meaningful way. And I don't know about your system, but what I know from working with lots of different software is that oftentimes the basic reports are created by engineers who say, well, we can get that data, so we're going to put it in a report. What we like to do is work with our CEOs to say, what knowledge do they need and what information do they need to get the knowledge, and what data do they need, and how do they get that data out in a report that then can be used to analyze and synthesize to get knowledge. And so those are the kinds of conversations that we're having with home care company CEOs and operating system companies to really look at how we work together to get that knowledge. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I think it illustrates what you were saying about systems and culture and data-oriented decision-making are all part of what these top-tier companies are doing.
Right, exactly. And those are, I think, bang on, those are the effective strategies to optimize operations. Have knowledge about your data, make sure you can really take meaningful information out of that data. That's really, really great. Okay, moving on. With this aging population, Stephen, what innovations or what changes do you see shaping the future of home care delivery?
Well, that's a great question and very timely, because we just did a major industry study with another company looking at the factors that are shaping the future of home care. We looked at outside forces and trends. We looked at pain points that CEOs and other leaders are experiencing. We looked at technology and what respondents see as the future of technology. We looked at things like industry consolidation. And so, this first quarter of 2024, we've been deeply immersed in understanding the factors that are going to shape the future of home care. And so if we sort of look in our crystal ball and say, what does this industry look like 5 years from now? What I see are things like the industry will continue to consolidate. There will be more bigger companies. There are more franchise companies. There are more franchisors, and there are more franchisees. We've seen the entrance of private equity companies into home care, and they're having a huge impact on technology, on the franchise systems, and on large independent home care companies. So all of these pieces sort of go together. We see technology playing a much bigger role, and it falls into a couple of buckets. First of all, operating systems will continue to grow and expand and develop. A lot of talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Already, most software companies are doing some things that would fit under that umbrella of artificial intelligence. Some are hyping it more than others. Some are doing a lot of amazing things with it. Some are creating false expectations around it. So watching that whole piece becomes really important. One of the big challenges in the future will continue to be the shortage of caregivers. And so there's a lot of buzz and activity and investment in technology to supplement the caregiver in the home with remote patient monitoring and tablet-based communication and some of those other technologies. However, what we've seen over the last decade and a half is that when people try to create new technology that's monitoring clients in their homes, the clients resist the technology because they don't want to they don't want to have their privacy infringed upon. And so we've seen some great growth in telehealth, for example, on the home healthcare side, because patients could see the value of that daily telehealth conversation with the nurse back in a central station, monitoring their vital signs and reporting those vital signs back to their physician. But in non-medical home care, there's less evidence to demonstrate the viability of a remote monitor of some sort. And so the clients are resisting the technology. And so how do we get past that? Because we're going to be faced with this shortage of caregivers. So that's a whole nother arena that we look at. And our members, for the most part, have done a much better job of recruiting than the industry as a whole. And so they have shifted their focus from recruiting over to retention and engaging their caregivers and engaging them in the culture of the company and the core values. And so retention becomes the focus, not recruiting. It's not to say that they don't have a full-time effort going into recruiting new caregivers, but they're recruiting a different type of caregiver. They're increasing the quality of the applicants. They're not constantly churning caregivers. Yeah. There's always some level of churn. But when you look at, the industry average last year was 77.1%. So if a company had 100 caregivers, 77 of them left during a 12-month period. That means you had to hire 77 to replace those. And then if you were going to grow by 10%, you had to hire another 10 and have them stay for a year. So we see how this caregiver recruiting and retention issue is a huge issue, and it's going to be with us forever. And so the companies of the future are building that into their systems. They're hiring people who are top tier, high quality, energetic recruiters and retention managers who are focused on retaining those caregivers. And then we know that home care has a huge future because we have this aging population. The first baby boomers are now turning to that age of 75 or 80 where they are looking for care. And the good news is that a lot of those baby boomers who are looking for care themselves 10 years ago or 15 years ago were looking for care for their aging parents. And so they're more familiar with home care than they were 10 years ago. But still, a significant number of aging adults and their primary family caregivers have little or no knowledge of home care. And so we got a big educational effort to go through. So those are some of the kinds of things that we see in the future. And we have our members actively involved, as I mentioned, in the Home Care Association of America and in the National Association for Home Care and Hospice. They're involved in their state chapters. They're involved in advocacy. They're connected with their legislators. They're connected with their local communities, with the local government, with chambers of commerce, with local colleges. There's also a big effort undergone in many communities to attract high school students to want to come to home care as a profession or come to healthcare in general as a profession. And so there's a lot of things going on at that advocacy level, and many of our members are actively involved in that process.
Interesting. Stephen, tell us a little bit about how home care CEOs can influence policy change.
Well, there's three things. There's one is being actively involved in their national and state association. And then I mentioned at one point, half of the board members of the Home Care Association of America were present or former members of Home Care CEO Forum. So our members are actively involved and actively engaged. The second is being actively engaged in your local community. And many of our members are working with local aging care networks. They're involved in their local chamber of commerce, their Better Business Bureau. They're involved in legislative activities at the local and state level. And then the third one is developing their own companies to be significant members of the community. While bigger is not necessarily better, we know that if you have a significant company, you have the opportunity to influence, whether it's legislators, regulators, politicians, other members of the healthcare continuum, physicians, hospital administrators. And so the stronger your company and the more presence you have, the more influence you have. And so growing a bigger company, and a little bit ago, you were talking about CEOs and data and information. And what we talk about is the bigger your company, the more the owner and CEO is able to work on the business instead of in the business. And it gives you that opportunity to be engaged in the community, to be engaged in the local marketplace, to oversee the recruiting and retention process, because they're not in the day-to-day business of providing care. If you're a small company, remember, half the companies in America are under $1.7 million. If you're running a company under $1.7 million, you're in the business every day. You're not having much time to work on the business. And so that's why we want to bring companies together and help them grow so that they have a bigger influence and make a bigger difference with more clients.
Absolutely. That's a wealth of knowledge that you have shared, Stephen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that, and I'm sure the audience got in-depth knowledge about some of those questions that or topics that we discussed today. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. Until the next episode, this is Ruby, and we are signing off. Thank you. Welcome to Caresmartz 360 on Air, a home care podcast. I am Ruby Mehta.